We've seen a huge increase in the number of people who get graduate degrees, and I wonder to what extent that is actually part of an arms race, a sort of an evolutionary arms race that is just about, everyone having to upskill to just keep their place in the market, or to what extent it is that the workplace is genuinely changing and that people need those extra skills. Sean, which do you think more of?
It's a great question. From the data I've seen, and in my experience, it's both.
Right.
And so there are folks that say it's just an arm race, these credentials are not needed, and there's the others in the kind of purist human capital camp. The economy is evolving and we need more and more skills, more and more education. And there's a little of both going on. So when you look at the skills bias technological change that economists write about and research, right? You've had, I think it was mentioned this morning, this polarization of the economy. You have a lot of growth at the top end, some growth at the low end, and kind of some problems in the middle. When you look at, one of the examples I've looked at recently actually is administrative assistants, oddly enough. And I don't know that the administrative assistants, secretaries as they used to be called, are the best example. They're certainly not the strongest. But if you consider that role, and you can do it now on your phone or on your iPad, you go to a site like Indeed.com and take a look at, in New York City, or pick the city of your choice, what is the administrative assistant kind of role demanding? Now, of course, there are people who just schedule meetings and help get coffee and that kind of thing. But you'll find things like managing other team members, social media, authoring correspondence, rather just dictating, taking dictation, and working with technology, managing systems, analyzing data from Excel, in those sorts of roles. So it's a really extreme example. But at all different levels of the workforce, I think you can demonstrate in different ways that there has been growth at that graduate level. And as the bachelor's degree has become normative, you can both skill people up to that more advanced level because there's a pool of them there. That's what happened in the US and has been happening around the world in terms of if you rewind 75, 100 years, high school wasn't even universal. And then once we had high school, it was the bachelor's degree. And then after World War II, the bachelor's degree was more common. So the skills requirements have been escalating. To the second point, there is also that arms race. To get ahead, and you learn this when you speak with employers, the bachelor's degree is that baseline typically for professional work. So to differentiate yourself in the workforce as a candidate, more and more you may need or want that master's degree.
So that makes sense then from the individual's point of view. But actually, it could be a rather costly decision right across an economy to the extent that people are just doing this to stand out. Like, we're all spending, or a lot of people are spending an extra year getting qualifications that, yes, they'll be rewarded. This will show in the ROI because employers are going to reward it, but only because you've now signaled something that, a generation ago you signaled with your bachelors. I mean, this genuinely does worry me. What do you think?
I think it's a bit of both. I agree with Sean. But I think in many areas, given the way we've structured, for example, the undergraduate business program, much of that, indeed more than half of it in our school, has nothing to do with business. It's basic education in arts and sciences. So when we layer on then the major in a particular area, it's simply the need for skills beyond that is driving it. For example, in the accounting profession, most of the states, a decade ago, required another 30 hours beyond the 120 in an undergraduate to be able to sit for the CPA exam, to be credentialed as a CPA. So I think just the demands that are out there in terms of what you have to bring to the workplace to be successful. I also think that's one of the reasons why you're seeing in business schools a rapid growth in specialized master's programs, one-year programs that give them a differentiating set of skills, whether it be in risk management, digital marketing, accounting, as we've already talked about, taxation. And we're finding that employers look at that as really kind of the entry level. While it's codified in accounting, in many other areas, that specialized master's degree gives them a drill down into a sector that really is necessary. They wouldn't have that level of skill from a traditional undergraduate degree.
So, I mean, another reason that people could be having to move towards masters is if the undergraduate or the bachelor's degree is not giving them what it used to give them. I mean, I raise this as a possibility, just a logical possibility. I'm not saying that it's what's happened. And that could be because people are entering at a different level than they used to. I mean, when we had a much more homogenous and a much smaller group of people going to university, you had an expectation that people come out really the top, part of the school leavers cohort, and also that these people were from well-off families, supportive families who understood about education, had a background in education. You could just go straight in, and then at the end of your 3 or 4 years, you've got them to that level. And so is part of what's driving the master's programs then that for a very good reason, we've expanded education and we're having to do an awful lot more helping people from different backgrounds, taking people who started in different points, maybe using more of the first years of undergraduate in getting people up to a level we might have been able to assume, say, a generation ago.
No, I think that's a hard question to answer, but certainly when you have people with a bachelor's degree, there's these interesting studies that have been done about your undergraduate degree and its reputation sometimes follows you, right? Even if you go to a more elite graduate school, and then vice versa. You have people who might study at a miscellaneous state university here in the US, and then they go to London School of Economics or somewhere else, and they have a more prestigious graduate degree, and then how does that impact their earnings? So there's that signaling and screening nature of master's degrees that you're absolutely right. In the past, whether you're looking at 20 years ago or certainly 40 years ago, the employer could say, if I'm hiring a bachelor's degree graduate, they have a certain level of skills and perseverance, and whether you're looking at social class or something else, there's all kinds of things that are correlated with that you knew you were hopefully getting. And then there's that debate too, is does a bachelor's degree mean much when it's commodified? But I would emphasize that it does seem that the returns are there. Right, it's true of college degrees in general, and the premiums we've heard about all day, 70% over a high school diploma. That's the average. For a master's degree, I think it's about 99%. And when you look at the college wage premium in the US and how it's changed over time, yes, it remains near an all-time high, but it has flattened out and it's dipped. And where it's actually grown is when you decouple it. We always talk about bachelor's degree and above, typically, this broad category, but the income gains have actually been driven by advanced degrees. That's been going up. The bachelor's degree maintains its advantage on a relative basis over if you don't have one, and certainly over a high school diploma. But there's a lot of growth in the salary premiums that's concentrated in the advanced degree. And so you have people going to that, and you have employers paying for it too. If there was not demand for these graduates, again, whether it's the undergraduate level or the graduate level, you would see in the salary premiums and you'd see in the job market in terms of unemployment a different situation, I think, than we see today.
You can tell from the color of my hair, I've been doing this for a while, and I've done it all in major state universities, public universities. I don't really think that there has been a greater challenge in terms of the preparation of students going into an undergraduate program. I think simply the requirements of them when they go out into the workplace has increased. I mean, when I first started serving as a dean, our major worry was with the elevator work when Y2K hit. That was what we were worried about. The euro wasn't yet in circulation. We had no social media. There was no phone in my pocket. Digital world didn't exist really in a way that it does today. The data that is available that someone needs to turn into information and then knowledge and then strategy wasn't readily available. I think that's the challenges that you need to be able to deal with at a basic entry level are so much broader than they were just a few years ago.
I suppose one of the things that has informed my question is, I mean, as you know, or any of the audience who've heard me speak before, like I was based in Brazil for several years, and it's the country that has the highest education premiums in the world. So if you get a degree compared with someone who hasn't graduated high school, it's a 5 times difference. And there isn't another country that we've data for that has that wide a gap. And it certainly is not because Brazilian universities are the world's best. There are some very good universities in Brazil, but it simply is not that. It is because you are differentiating yourself so much from people who have, much lower skills level. There's an enormous, number of people who don't have skills. And but if you took away from that as a government that we have the highest graduate premium in the world, therefore we need an awful lot more graduates. Actually, the information that is giving you is our schools aren't good enough. There shouldn't be that wide a gap. It's there because the schools aren't good enough. So I think sometimes we jump too fast to saying the ROI is big, therefore we must do more of it. It might be giving us some different information. Maybe not. Maybe I'm not right. Maybe this isn't the case in the US. Does that resonate with you at all?
Well, for whatever reason, if you look at job openings right now today, it's about 20% of job openings either prefer or require a master's or an advanced degree above a master's. And I think it's about 12% of the US population that has one. So there's a gap there. About 55% of the jobs are at the bachelor's level. And these are totals that can add to more than 100% because you might require a bachelor's but prefer a master's and that kind of thing. And it's a very small portion of not very small, but a smaller percentage of where the growth has been. What has the growth been? And it's been in healthcare and analytics, really driven a lot by software development and coding and those sorts of things, finance. Those are college level roles. So employers are requesting and seeking this kind of thing, and I think people are pursuing it.
I think it's, okay, so what I'm going to take from that then is that, you know, different countries are in different situations. It's a very obvious thing to say, but I think sometimes we forget that and we think, you know, oh, well, this is applicable here, therefore it must be applicable there.
Right, okay.
Know?
Yeah, in the US, I'm not a comparative education expert per se, but the US does seem ahead, also ahead in online education, but just in general in educational attainment in terms of the master's level. And even as a nation, if you look around the US, the percentages vary widely. I think it's 24% of people in DC, Boston, and the Bay Area have an advanced degree. And then if you go to Charlotte, North Carolina, that's more like 12%. If you go to Austin, I think it's in the teens. And now the regional economies vary, but there's actually different subcultures in terms of what employers prefer and how they look at credentials and whether they're elite or whether they're from, not that state institutions can't be elite, but you know, a highly selective small institution. And I think we talk about these credentials as if they're commodities, but we don't talk about the differences in curriculum and in brand and in selectivity and all the other aspects that make up, you know, what's the degree that you earned, and whether it's the specialization point is key. That's what employers are often seeking in a master's, is someone who has further specialized. You need that baseline, and perhaps you did specialize in engineering or business or writing or English, but when you're looking to advance in your career, further down the line, you know, the master's degree signals the fact that you've focused on an area of study and you're now more advanced in that domain.
So what about, say, somebody who comes in and who wants to specialize in something? I mean, maybe it's not so much an issue for you if you're talking about one-year courses, but they specialize and then the world changes. You know, isn't there a danger there that you're saying, well, okay, so employers want people who've really specialized in some aspect of things, but, you know, actually that's going to last them like 3 years?
I think that's the opportunity that we have in terms of what business schools can do. You know, there was a time when the undergraduate was sort of the credential to get you in the door. Now it's a specialized master's. That gets you in the door with a set of skills, often in a particular vertical. The opportunity for us as business schools is then when they are 5 years out, 10 years out, and are ready to move to a more strategic, we believe we will then have the opportunity to offer to them an MBA program. And right now we're actually developing something for C-level executives for an executive doctorate. I truly believe that what the economy is going to require and what society is going to require is a lifelong commitment to this, whether it's with continuing academic credentials or something else. You know, one of my favorite quotes that I use every time I'm before alums, you know, Eric Hoffer said that in times of drastic change, it's the learners who inherit the future. Because the learned find themselves equipped to live in a world that no longer exists. That's what I tell our alums. You have to, it's great you graduated. I tell them we'll have a party tonight for your commencement for this program, but tomorrow you have to become a learner again. I think it's just the nature of the world that we're dealing with. And you're right, the skill set may change in 3 years, and it probably will change. The challenge for business schools then is we traditionally have life cycles for programs that run into decades. Actually, the life cycle of our program ought to be no more than a few years.
Yeah,
because
we talked about this
what the demand is, what the economy is demanding and the skill set that's demanding requires us to be really doing real-time curricular innovation. Now, getting a faculty to get their head around real-time curricular innovation so that you're actually changing the course as you go through based on what you've just discovered in the world, that's a challenge for faculty, but it's something we have to push hard on.
Is there anyone who's in the audience who doesn't have a bachelor's degree? You're not going to put your hand up, are you? Yeah? You haven't. So how did you end up doing this job then?
I don't know if I can answer that in one fell swoop. Growing up in a house where reading was part of the everyday thing, I wound up going into engineering.
Yeah. So you're working for a firm?
No, I wasn't. I'm working for IBM for 35 years.
Right.
But I was going to be an engineer because that's what I thought I wanted to be. I was dyslexic in math and didn't figure it out until I had already dropped out. And I was in the CUNY system.
Yeah.
I worked for a company, IBM back then, did a lot of investment in in-house education, as AT&T talked to earlier, and so I benefited from that. So
right. So you got your education another way, like via a company, essentially.
Yeah, exactly, by experience and other company education methods.
So who here has a master's? God, nearly everybody. Who has a PhD? You see, there's too many of us.
That-
I have one too. You know, I mean, that used to really mean something.
That should total 12%. If it was a
Yeah, so
general
it'd be-
U.S. population sample, it would have been 1 out of every 10 people.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, okay, so we're at a higher education conference. It's hardly
Maybe a few more permitted.
we're not a standard.
But that's our
group.
mindset often in higher ed. I mean, I would add, you know, we're not up here saying that we need to mass produce more and more credentials and just escalate the requirements. I think that's the reason innovation is happening here with the masters. It's shorter term. It tends to be more professional in nature. It's an area that, especially in business schools, is getting modularized. So hopefully we'll have stackable things. We'll have certificates. We'll have modules. We now have MOOCs and ways that you can acquire learning and get some type of credential or degree or something issued by a university that demonstrates to an employer that you can do something and that gives you the knowledge and skills.
I sort of wonder whether if we did this again in a generation's time, which I hope we will be still doing, you know, although there may be different people attending, whether there might be more people who say that they have a career path similar to yours. Like maybe we're at sort of peak, you know, everybody having to go the same route. I mean, my own father ended up being the government actuary in Ireland, and he didn't have a degree. Like he just went into the civil service and worked his way up, and now nobody does that. You have to have your degree just to get into the civil service. But you know, maybe in another generation we'll have managed to break it down into smaller, more modular things that people can take different paths through. I mean, I think that's a big challenge for universities. And I want to throw this open to the floor because it's a fairly short session and I want to get a lot of questions. Yep. Wait for your mic. It's just coming here.
You've been speaking a lot about the outcomes and matching the students with the employer. And my question relates to how do you maintain a faculty that's adaptable to match their practical skills with the changing business environment, specifically in the accounting world or in the more specialized degrees? So to what extent is practical experience of faculty deemed equally, if not more important, than the research side?
That's a very, very good question. Yeah.
I'll take that one on. We have to build a portfolio of faculty that has various faculty profiles. The people that in most programs, especially in accounting, who are the most connected to practice and the closest in terms of kind of curricular innovation to map what's happening out there in practice are those who are often clinical faculty, or they're sometimes called faculty in the practice of, or they're called lecturers. They have various names at various universities. And so what most major research universities are doing if they maintain a PhD program, if you look at the faculties within the departments, it's really a portfolio of faculty. They're not all tenure track. They're not all on a path where it's publish or perish to get out. There are many who are very well paid, often close to the same as the tenure track, whose work profile is much more focused on curricular innovation, connection to the practice community. Many of them have PhDs. They're just faculty who prefer that kind of focus. What the schools have to do, though, is make the reward system such that, one, there's an incentive to do that, and second, you have to build a culture where those people are part of the fabric of the school. At the last school I was serving as dean, if you ask someone walking down the hall who's clinical versus who's tenure track, most people didn't know. They were all part of the fabric of the school. So our challenge is building that kind of portfolio of faculty. You'll always need, if you're going to have a research university and a PhD program, you'll always need those faculty whose focus is primarily on research. But as your question suggests, you'll never have a program that reacts to the demands of the business community if you don't have other faculty who are focused on that very purpose.
Sean, do you want to come in on this?
Yeah. No, I think that's the perfect answer. I think it's also a trend in higher ed toward, yes, there's been a shift toward adjunct faculty, who, whether it's good or bad, that's been happening for decades. But that's where you've traditionally gotten your practitioners to come in and teach part-time or full-time programs. And now I believe there's a trend toward full-time, non-tenured faculty.
Right, full-time clinical.
When you launch a new degree program and you want it to be nimble, whether it's a master's or something else, you know, you're making a bet in that traditional model. It might be a few $1 million. It's hundreds of thousands. And salaries and benefits, all right, let's hire the 2 or 3 people. They'll start teaching it and hopefully we'll get students. And now we have a very competitive and volatile market. You can't necessarily do that, and you can't ensure, if those faculty are also focused on research all the time, that they're going to have the best industry experience. So one of the models is you could have non-tenured full-time faculty, and they're kind of straddling the world of business.
And that's been the model in many schools for more than a decade.
Yeah. I have two hands, 2 ladies here, and there's a gentleman here, and I'll take all 3.
So my name is Raya. I come from Fullbridge, and I have to say that one of the things that I find personally most nerve-wracking about higher ed in the U.S. right now is this proliferation of these one-year master's programs, because I went to a great business school that I won't name here, but that started proliferation of a ton of one-year programs for revenue generations for the purpose of the university, so that they could keep the MBA flagship small. And this was a strategy for the university to grow that university. And then they had to go and make markets for those graduates, because it was much harder for them to get hired. And they were programs that were designed to do directly after a bachelor's program, again, in a very specified area. And if we look at the higher education systems across different countries, we see that that you can get that specialization in a bachelor's or a undergraduate level. And I wonder if that's actually what we need to rethink about, whether or not there can be new types of vocational or associate's degrees that or even bachelor's degrees that bring that specialization in, because I worry that what we're doing is adding to the cost burden of the student at the benefit of the university, without thinking about through what that means for long-term ROI for the student in terms of career and all of that.
Can you pass your microphone to the lady behind you, and I'll take the
Hi, I'm Marian from Truro College, and it seems a lot of the evolution of master's level programs came because of our assumption that undergraduate programs were liberal arts programs, where by and large you walked out not having skills for a job. So particularly in the professional schools, the master's level professional schools, the idea was there are a lot of practicum, a lot of business focused, a lot of job requirements that were part and parcel of getting your master's degree, and that made you job ready. So what I'd like to ask is, in terms of connecting the dots from this morning's program, we're talking about now colleges doing more to get students ready for the job market. Right. If they take on that role and move away from this sort of generalist knowledge typical of liberal arts colleges, how will that impact what is happening on the master's degree level in graduate programs?
And so can I have this gentleman's question here as well?
Sure.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Hi, I'm Colin Potts from Georgia Tech, and I couldn't agree more that we need a portfolio of faculty. But why restrict tenure track positions only to those doing research? Isn't that just a way of saying that everybody's equal, but some more equal than others?
Yeah.
And what's another kind of existential question? What's the role of the PhD in an environment where there's declining government research funding across the board, and probably consolidation of universities and fewer faculty positions in the future? Why are we expanding those programs?
So I've got two strong challenges to the existence of masters and one strong challenge to the existence of PhDs here. So on the master side, that there are courses that are, more from the university's point of view, revenue generation, and that if bachelor's degrees change in the way that we talked about this morning, maybe we would stop seeing the need for so many masters, and then some equal, but others more equal than some more equal than others, and why so many PhDs? It's a lot of questions.
I'll start in reverse order. I'll address the issue around PhDs. At least in the business discipline, the production of PhDs has declined dramatically over the last 20 years. So we're actually producing far fewer, which is a challenge for us because we still believe in supply and demand, and the prices keep going up. So the cost of new faculty accelerates every year. The challenge in terms of government funding for research, that's certainly a challenge. It's more so, I think, in the sciences and the engineering areas than it is in the professional areas like business. As to why not tenure people based on other paths than research, if I were the guru of the higher education and could wave a magic wand and make that happen, I would make it happen. But for now, at least, the resistance is so strong against that, at least in the universities that I've been a part of. The solution has been the path of a clinical faculty member or a professor in the practice of.
Do you see challenges to the very existence of the masters from, either beefed up bachelors or people looking and saying this is revenue generation?
Well, two comments. We could easily put into the undergraduate program the kind of skill building that is presently in a one-year specialized master's. But we would do that at the expense of the first 2 years, which were a broad general education. The view of most people, including the accrediting organization for my academy, says no, a bachelor's degree ought to be a broad coverage of the humanities, arts, a general liberal arts kind of education. If you do that, then you have at most 6 courses to do the other parts that are the traditional major. We could do it, but it would dramatically change what an undergraduate degree looks like today in terms of the first 2 years. In terms of building these one-year programs to generate funds for the university, I can tell you that the schools that I've been a part of, we never added a specialized master's program unless there was a demand from the marketplace. The marketplace told us,
employers.
The marketplace told us we want these. There's an organization here in town, it's the Business Higher Education Forum, which is a Fortune 500 group that essentially partners with business schools to help guide curriculum development for the next 10 years. We wouldn't do anything unless they said to us, this is the direction that you need to be going.
Sean?
Well, I'm glad accreditation was mentioned just as one piece of the triad of state governments and accreditation, the federal government, and of course at the master's level, a lot of it in terms of occupational specialization is licensing groups, and I'll call them sort of guilds. I mean, this system that we have, whether it's whether you believe it's good or bad, is just codified across these regulations and these standards, particularly around faculty. I mean, if you want to teach a master's level course, or I think even an undergraduate course in North Carolina, you're going to need a PhD. And if you're in an AACSB school in business, part of the issue is there's not as many PhDs, and so you don't have faculty supply, and so you need to find a terminally credentialed faculty member, and so we need to create pathways to get more business school professors. And you look at nursing, and you look in finance, and I think we'd really have to reboot some of these regulations to really have innovation.
But should we? Should that happen?
I think it could be healthy. I mean, there is a danger. One of the questions was about sort of overeducation and oversupply. If we believe in markets, they reset themselves. Probably the best example, again, a little extreme, but a very, very clear example is the law market. There was and is an overproduction of lawyers, and it absolutely tanked, and law schools, are filling budget holes, and they're, shrinking the size of their class, changing their standards. To some extent, I think it happened a little bit with MBA education as well. The general MBA kind of topped out, and the specialized have been growing. So these markets do reset themselves, and if we create too many graduates that are they have a master's degree that isn't worth anything, sure, it might take a year or two or more, but it will hopefully reset itself. And I think what we have now appropriately is various regulators and outside parties that are trying to look at, are the outcomes there, and how do we steer the incentives into the right place?
I mean, this does speak to a point that was made several times during the day about information for students. I mean, if students can tell rather rapidly that this isn't actually adding anything, then...
And I think the information set out there for prospective students is so rich. I mean, we never have an open house session for a program without the first question being placement. I mean, students are, they rightly so, they drill down onto that part. They're not buying a specialized master's because it sounds good on paper. They want to know, where are my job prospects?
I probably have time for like 1 or 2 more questions. I've one here. Yep.
Hi, it's Kevin Kinzer from the State University of New York. One of the things that I've been noticing throughout is some of these almost like inherent contradictions or oddnesses that have been going on in these. And the one that comes up here, and it's come up before, is this idea that universities aren't providing the skills necessary for the workforce, but on the other hand, more and more jobs are requiring university degrees. Is that odd? I mean,
it is odd. You're absolutely right.
So what's the explanation for businesses being so irrational?
Great question. Thank you. Right, which of the two of you wants to take that one on first, and which of you wants to have some time?
I'm a business dean. I have to say businesses are rational. Maybe it's the tracking through the programs that's not rational.
I think on the whole, and certainly there are many things that we could optimize about higher education, the data seems to indicate that businesses are generally happy with graduates, at least in terms of, I mean, look at all the people, sure, it's flattened out, that are enrolling, that are finding jobs, that have a certain package of skills. Is it optimal? Perhaps not. Is it too expensive? Maybe. But we're at a scale of millions of new graduates each year, and all the postings that employers are filling, whether they're college level jobs or not, I think it's working pretty well. I think there is a disconnect sometimes between the business rhetoric and then what they actually do. And the same is the case when you look at some of the arguments about, well, we don't need college, everyone should be an entrepreneur. And then you find that these private equity firms are hiring people only from Yale and Harvard and Stanford. There is a dissonance. And I think dialogue is important to sort of, use evidence to uncover what's the reality out there versus just a polarized political debate, because I think there is an access issue here too, which is something entirely different.
I mean, part of my answer to that one would be that, employers are rationally choosing from what's available out there. So, they're choosing people who have degrees because they're better than people who don't have degrees for whatever their purpose is. But that doesn't mean they think the degree is optimal. So they may be telling you that the degree should be offering something different, but given that it isn't, that's the person they want and they're going to pay more for.
Yeah, and just one sort of PS to that. I mentioned the Business Higher Education Forum. These large companies are investing a lot of their time to tell us what we should be doing in terms of preparation for their workforce. So I think maybe we're having a better information flow in terms of the kinds of skill sets they're looking for.
You'd hope so, because we're meant to be in the information
Thank you.
revolution. So.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, that's all we have time for this session. So thank you very much
thank
to my
you.
panelists.
Lovely.
Thank you.